Welcome, everyone. Joshua Severe Weather, and happy Thursday to you. In the tropics, things are fairly quiet for the time being, but that is expected to change as we head to next week, as our next system looks like it is going to develop and potentially could affect the Gulf Coast at some point here late next week into early the following week. There have been some changes from yesterday's forecast for a system that still hasn't formed. So obviously, we still have some time on this until a storm does in fact form. The certainty level of this forecast is not super high yet. However, conditions look like they are going to still be supportive of a pretty significant storm, probably even a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico by this time next week. Now, the track right now has slowed down a little bit from yesterday, from when the storm may form. I'm going to kind of walk you through that and how that may impact things in the longer term. But please know that it is still a little bit early in the game to make a precise forecast. I know people are asking about Florida, Louisiana, Texas. All I can say at this point is climatology does favor Florida, but that does not mean Louisiana or Texas or even Mexico could not still be impacted by this. And of course, when I say Louisiana, I imply that Mississippi and Alabama get included in that since the way the coast curves. But here's a look at what's going on this afternoon. We have a 40% chance of development here in the next 7 days. It's probably not going to happen for the rest of this week, and less likely that it's going to happen over the weekend. As we head to next week, though, I do expect that these chances are going to climb significantly. And we do have two areas we're still watching here interacting with each other in the central Atlantic. The 20% area is new, and that is something that could impact you near Bermuda here in a few days. The 30% area is the remnant circulation of what was Tropical Storm Gordon. And that one is going to be heading into cooler water and is probably losing its window to redevelop into a tropical depression or storm. This one actually might have a little bit better chance despite the 20s and the 30s, just because it's heading into some warmer water and it is going to be separating itself from Gordon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. But I do want to give you guys an overview of what's going on, kind of set the table for this forecast. I am stalling as well. This is my lunch break from work, and I'm waiting on the 12Z models to keep running so I can show you the latest information, because by the time you see this, they'll be in, but I have to get back to my day job. I hope you guys understand that. This is a labor of love, and I have a lot of other priorities as well that I've got to take care of. So appreciate your patience with me on that, though. Here in the eastern United States, we do still have a pretty deep trough digging in with low pressure forming here off of the New England and Northeast coast, and an upper level low still spinning across the Carolinas and Virginia. This is the upper low that brought the unnamed tropical storm into the Carolinas on Monday morning. And fortunately, that kind of rain has stopped. And we still see some locally heavy showers in parts of Virginia and North Carolina, but nothing like what we saw Monday and Monday night, fortunately. And then the next system is spinning very vigorously across the prairies region here, and we are going to be dealing with potential severe weather across the north central U.S. I haven't talked a lot about that, but I have mentioned it in a few videos now. This area is going to see some active weather in the next couple of weeks. And finally, out west, we do have a weak upper level low as well to track. That has brought some thunderstorms into portions of California over the last few days. So the important features here are this upper low, and this upper low, and nothing is in a hurry to move at this point. Now, over time, we are going to see an area of high pressure aloft continue to build here, but all of the action is going to happen underneath that high with some more significant ventilation that could help that system grow. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more here as well, give you guys a little bit more meteorology here as to why that happens. Here is a wider view of the tropics. And the areas we're watching are down in here for development, actually two separate circulations, one here and one that hasn't formed yet but may take shape over here. And this is coming from what's called the Central American Gyre. It typically shows up at the end of May and into June, and then again later in the season, late September into October, maybe even November. It is caused by spreading of air aloft. Divergence is the technical term. And what that does is it allows wind shear to lower and significant amounts of rain and thunderstorm cloud activity to build up. And you can kind of see that here. We definitely have that significant buildup on the Pacific side, not so much yet on the Caribbean side, but that is expected to change over the weekend into next week. We do have this upper low here, surface low here, and a bit of a boundary moving across, keeping things wet across the Bahamas. But if you're in the rest of the Gulf or across the Caribbean, you're actually dealing with relatively quiet weather at this point, and it may stay that way for a little bit longer as well. Here's a visible satellite image. Same thing I showed you, but the visible. And you can see spin up over here, spin up over here, low pressure here, kind of a boundary here in this direction, and then upper low spinning in here. And you can see kind of a concentration here to watch in the Pacific. But in the Caribbean, still very quiet right now, very little activity. Just some bubbling up of showers and storms. So nothing is in a rush to develop, nothing rapidly forming at this point. And as we get to the weekend, I still think it'll last that way as well. Really, all the rain here in the Gulf is basically near the Keys, far southern Florida. We do have some pop-up thunderstorms across inland parts of central Florida, but pretty quiet over Texas, Louisiana, and the rest of the Gulf Coast region, and very quiet as well around the Yucatan Channel. So as long as that remains, we're going to be in pretty good shape. There'll be some locally heavy rain in South Florida. We could see upwards of 2 to 3 inches in Miami-Dade, 1 to 2 in Broward and Palm Beach, as well as Monroe and southern parts of Collier counties. But nothing super extreme is expected. It doesn't mean it can't rain hard, just means we're not looking at a widespread rain event at this point. Now, over time, we are going to see things shifting across this area, and you can see a little bit of a weak flare-up at this point. There's some strong wind shear out of the southwest, keeping the Gulf at bay, and there's also a little bit of wind shear out of the northeast here, and we just don't have ideal conditions for the air to rise. That should change, though, over the next few days. Here's a look at the viz. You guys can see that as well. Light trade winds here from west to east, and then the southwest flow here. So you have competing wind directions as we go off with height. Too much wind shear to get anything to form. Interesting setup, though, here in the western Atlantic with this low pressure feature forming. This is going to dawdle around and actually has a chance of coming and maybe hitting Bermuda from the northwest here. Non-tropical, though, but some extended areas of maybe heavy rain over eastern New England and across Nova Scotia here on the northeast side of this. Bermuda's right here, and then we got a bit of a squeeze play going with low pressure here to the southwest, low pressure to the northwest of you, and the upper low and trough over here in the Carolinas. So not a favorable setup for tropical genesis, but one that certainly needs to be watched still with very warm waters. Here's the central Atlantic, and you can see our two systems spinning here. I'm going to give you the visible to get a better view of what's going on. And you can see the remains of Gordon obviously have a bigger area of showers and storms with them. There's probably no closed circulation. There's just a bit of a mid-level center right here, and that is fortunately moving away from any kind of land. The feature over here has that 20%. It doesn't look like it's developing much in the way of thunderstorm activity. Nothing closed off at this point, but as it separates itself away from this feature, it may have a chance of developing gradually into maybe a subtropical or even a tropical depression or storm. The next name on the list is Helene. I don't know what storm's going to get that name. I thought we were already going to have it, and we haven't yet. But that is something just to keep a close eye on if you're in Bermuda. The eastern Atlantic is looking very quiet right now. Lots of stable air in place. We do have some features to track, though, coming off of Africa. This one probably doesn't develop. This one over Mali and Burkina Faso, we do need to keep an eye on. Some models develop that here in about a week as it moves past the Cape Verde Islands. So I brought this map up yesterday, but again, you will see two areas we're focusing on in the Atlantic Basin for next week. One has a very high chance, 60% or more, of forming into a feature here in the Northwest Caribbean. But we're also going to have to watch the Atlantic. There may be some development here, about a 40% chance for that to happen somewhere over the central and eastern Atlantic. The following week could still have something to keep an eye on near and to the northeast of the islands. We're still going to be keeping an eye on things in the Western Caribbean and especially the Pacific side. By the way, I don't think this is our last feature here to track. There may be something that comes in behind it. But again, we don't quite know yet how that's going to play out. This is the Madden-Julian Oscillation. What this does is it shows you where areas of rising air and sinking air are. And we have not been in a very favorable area for development over the last 5 to 6 days. This is not favorable on the Atlantic side. But as we head over into phases 8 and 1, those signify much more rising motion and divergence aloft in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico areas, and certainly looks a lot more favorable at that point. So once we get after about the 24th or 25th, we should see a lot less wind shear and a lot more favorable activity. After that, we are still in somewhat of a favorable spot for things into early October. And obviously, as this forecast goes on further in time, that can change. In fact, we could be in more of an extended period where we're in 8-1, which would mean more hyperactive tropical activity. Even though it'll be October, things could still be very busy at that point. I want to show you guys this upper level pattern and explain it to you. What's going on right now is that we've got a huge area of high pressure over the Sonoran Desert of Mexico. You can see strong northerly flow coming in from the central U.S. into the Gulf. This is unfavorable for development and continues to be that way. What this is going to do is actually push a cold front down into this area. And with this northerly flow, it's not going to be favorable for anything to form before the weekend. In fact, you can see strong wind shear here and strong winds aloft from here. Both of these do not look favorable for development, at least through Saturday. And this has slowed down over the last couple of days. It's going to take a little time to get this front and this trough out of here. It may be until next Monday or Tuesday when things start to turn more favorable. You can see here, this is Monday around 7 o'clock Central in the evening. And we see all of the wind shear lifting away here, getting out of the area. And we see this area of high pressure aloft beginning to build in. This is when our Central American gyre starts taking over. And the Pacific shows some development, but we may be watching this area as it comes up into here towards next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. Fortunately, we've got a lot of time, so you'll see posts of models out there, and just know that probably another 4 or 5 days before we can start to even key in on what might actually happen. I said a few days ago I thought it was going to be Florida. I'm not giving up on that idea, but it doesn't mean you don't need to be watching elsewhere in the Gulf. That just seems to be the area that would have the most favorable spot for a storm to go. But certainly we can't make that call just yet. Here's a look at the United States. If you take a look at the ensembles, you can see towards the second part of next week, after our ridge of high pressure builds in, you see this ridge right here on Monday and Tuesday. That is going to lift away, and we've got a trough coming down. So eventually, as that trough moves in this direction, I expect it's going to scoop up whatever forms down in here and turn it northward. Where that turn happens is still awfully uncertain at this point. If you believe the GFS and you look at these blues, it favors somewhere in the central Gulf Coast region towards the beginning of the week after next, around the 30th. But this could certainly be quite a bit different. It may favor something here or something over here, and it's just way too early to make that kind of a call until this system does form. The European ensembles shows it very wet here in the Northwest Caribbean. The Caymans are going to see a ton of rain over the next 10 days. We eventually see that moisture shifting into the Florida Keys, the Panhandle, or the Peninsula, not the Panhandle, as well as the Southwestern Gulf, and especially on the Pacific side. And it gets wetter and wetter here across Florida and the Southeast. Right now, the ensembles indicate that high pressure winds out in Texas, and whatever forms is more than likely going to go into this general direction. And it may not look like that. It may look like this or like that. I don't know yet, but it's showing drier weather for Texas at this point. So while we never want to just say no in Texas, it is a lot harder to get systems to come up in that direction this time of the year because of where fronts are tracking. And you'll see after this feature moves out, there's still going to be some wet weather, still some unsettled weather across the Caribbean and the southern Gulf and the Southwest Atlantic. We may not be finished. We may see more storms, according to this ensemble forecast. Here's a look at the chance for a tropical system to form. And ignore this. I think it's trying to develop Gordon again. I don't think that happens. But over here, you see the area growing of 70 to 80% probability of something forming by Tuesday. And then that continues to climb. And we have a likely storm in the Northwest Caribbean Wednesday into Thursday. And then our chances start growing in a couple of different zones here, maybe something like this, by the time we get to next weekend. So this basically takes all of the ensembles and averages out the probability of something. And as you can imagine, some are going to be a lot stronger and some are going to be a lot lower in their prediction chance at this point. And again, until it forms, we just don't quite know. Here's what the ensembles are showing from earlier today, just so you guys can see. We start to see some ensemble solutions showing a depression or storm by next Monday or Tuesday here in the Western Caribbean. Things are a little bit slower, but we do have solutions that still can pull it up towards Florida by next Wednesday night and Thursday. Several others that keep it closer to the north coast of the Yucatan or in the Bay of Campeche by next Wednesday and Thursday. So this is a little bit slower now because it's lingering down here a little bit longer. But overall, we see a very big window of possibility The stronger solutions do favor from Louisiana over into Florida. The time frame, though, is highly uncertain. It could be as soon as Wednesday or Thursday of next week, or as late as Sunday or Monday the following week, the 30th, before a potential landfall. So again, does not give you any confidence yet as to what exactly will happen, but does show a lot of possibilities, and many of them showing a hurricane. Here's the European as well. It only goes out 10 days, but you can see a split here by the time we get to next Thursday. We have solutions in the Southwest Gulf. We have others moving into the Northeast Gulf, several showing a tropical storm. Fewer showing a hurricane in the GFS, but there are some that do show a hurricane here by the time we get to next weekend. So a lot showing towards Florida and a lot hanging out here a lot longer. And right now, that's kind of how I see this forecast. There's two different camps. There's something that gets stuck down in here like Francine did for a little bit and then eventually gets lifted out, or something that takes the shortcut, kind of like an Ian or a Michael may have. Not saying that that will happen again, but just to give you an idea of a potential track window there. So here's the latest operational GFS, and it should have a warning label after day 10 because it just is going to get a lot more rambunctious and a little bit, probably a lot more crazy. But you can see here, it is forming a tropical storm by next Wednesday near the Yucatan and into the Southern Gulf by Thursday night. You can see a lot of uncertainty here, but man, like I said, we're getting past 10 days here. I just really, I'll show it to you, but just please don't freak out if you're in Tampa, because the next run may have it in New Orleans and the run after may have it in Houston. Probably not Houston, but you guys get the drift, right? So this is still a good 10 days away. So it shows something that looks like it's going to go west. It gets stuck, and then it accelerates northeast, kind of like what we saw with Wilma back in 2005, but farther north. So again, obviously something that hits the Florida Peninsula needs to be watched all the way up into the Carolinas and Mid-Atlantic region. But this is just one model run. If I showed you guys the run before it, it is completely different. It's stuck back here in the Western Gulf, and then eventually it curves out and hits somewhere near Panama City and moves into the southeast. That's not, though, until October 1st with that landfall. The model run before that was obviously very aggressive. It did not have the system going over the Yucatan. It kept it through the Yucatan Channel, and as a result, much stronger. But things have already slowed down. I think this is too quick from the get-go here. So this particular system had it coming up and then making the turn towards Panama City, just like the run after it. And then you go back one run further, and system again clipping the Northeast Yucatan. This one, though, showing the landfall in Louisiana. So my point here is that the farther out in time we go, the more the model spread grows and the more uncertainty we have. We just can't get too worried about what's happening yet. This is a situation that, again, is going to take a lot of time to unfold and get a grasp on. We're probably not going to really know too much with confidence before next week. And I really don't even want to make an official forecast till about next Wednesday, because that's kind of at the timeline we're watching here. But again, the last few models of the GFS threaten Florida. That's kind of what my initial call was, but don't let up on things if you're west of Florida or in Mexico or the Yucatan as well. Here's the European from earlier, not as aggressive as the GFS. Colored me surprised on that, but it does have something in the Southwest Gulf beginning to turn northeast again. But notice how slow it is. This is still next weekend. Not this one tomorrow or Friday and Saturday and Sunday, but the following weekend. The AI is a little bit more aggressive. It does bring it into the same area, but eventually it gets scooped up and pulled northeast towards Florida, a weaker system at that point. And then the Canadian model, a little bit more in line with the GFS, showing development here Monday and Tuesday, and then a hurricane by Wednesday night and Thursday in the Central Gulf. And the Canadian now says Louisiana would be the landing zone, but the run before it did not show that. In fact, it was a lot quicker and brought it up towards Pensacola and Destin. And then the Icon model, which doesn't go out as far as the others, does show gradual development here Monday and Tuesday near the Yucatan, tracking westward into the Gulf, getting stuck, and eventually making a gradual turn. And my guess is with this slowing down, it's probably keying in on something in one of these two directions here towards the end of next week. So that's what we're looking at across the rest of the Atlantic. Here are two features we're tracking now. And the GFS struggles with developing both of them, just too much wind shear. It does have some development over the Atlantic, over the main development region beyond that, and maybe an Isaac and the next storm after that, and maybe even a hurricane at this point. But Again, a case study with the GFS. This is next Friday from the 12Z, and look at the run before. It had a Category 3 hurricane, then the next run had it in the same place as a meager tropical storm. So we're going to get a lot of this flipping and flopping here. The European shows something as well, but it kills the first system and develops the second one here next week. This Canadian model doesn't give you a lot of development chances. It has something weak here and something weak behind it, which may end up being right if you know how the season has gone out here. And the Icon model, which again doesn't go out quite as far, does not develop the first system, but does develop the second. And of course, that would turn it more to the northeast. So we've got a lot of time still here, folks. I will keep you guys posted on a daily basis. One thing is for certain, we are getting sick of seeing this in the Western Pacific, another tropical storm making landfall near Shanghai, now down to a depression. And we have a tropical depression moving through Laos into Thailand. Both areas have been hit so hard over the last few weeks. Shanghai getting more heavy rain as this system slows down nearby. And then here's a depression moving across Vietnam into Laos, and then eventually Thailand and Myanmar. And that area is dealing with phenomenal amounts of rain from the last storm last week. And here we go again, where we're going to see as much as 50 centimeters above average rainfall over the next 7 days in this part of Laos and Vietnam. That's going to cause tremendous flooding. We're probably going to see flooding all the way back here into Thailand and Myanmar. And if you are a praying person, obviously, I think those folks could use your prayers as they deal with this incredible wet weather. I appreciate everybody's time today. Hope you guys have a blessed day, and I'll catch up with you again tomorrow. As always, I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Even though I'm a meteorologist, I don't do TV because I truly believe that the main reason I'm here is to share the good news with you guys, that there's a time for everything, and there's a time for our Lord and Savior here to come again. Ecclesiastes 3 says, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, tear and time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And just know this, that we are going through all of these roller coasters in our life, all of these storms, weather, finances, health, jobs, fractured relationships. These are all things that have occurred since day one, since the first century church. Does not mean that God is not good. It just means that it's very clear that these times will remain turbulent. But if you want to turn away from that turbulence eternally, you've got the choice between now and your last day on earth and your final breath to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. And if you do so, and you go out in faith in the unseen, you'll be rewarded by God by giving eternal life in heaven with Jesus. And that's the good news I wanted to share with you all today. I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll catch up with you again tomorrow. See ya.